Well, welcome to Christ and Culture. This is Pastor Jeff Short. Rather, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural analyst. And today we're going to be talking about a book that I've been reading the last couple months or so called Enlightenment Now by author Steven Pinker, The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress. And this is written by an atheist, a scientist, and he's wanting to make an argument that our Enlightenment values in the Western world, those kinds of thinking that came up in the 17th, 18th centuries with the rise of modern science and scientific thinking, Isaac Newton, the kind of thinking that was developed in Europe during the Enlightenment period. It's actually called Enlightenment, with the kind of philosophers, French philosophers that were writing at the time, Voltaire, Condorcet, and all of the other Enlightenment thinkers. That kind of thinking has led to where we are today with all kinds of modern conveniences and extended lifespans and all kinds of different blessings. Now, he doesn't see these things as blessings from God. He sees them as the result of humans getting themselves organized around scientific thinking and logical reasoning and putting away spiritual values and Christianity in particular. So he's anti-Christian. He doesn't believe that Christianity had anything to contribute, but that is contradictory to other scholars like Alfred North Whitehead, the great famous philosopher, who said that all of the scientific enterprise is built upon a Christian worldview, and without Christianity, the kind of scientific thinking we know today would never have come about. And if you look at other cultures like Hindu culture and even Islam, they never produced the kind of science that the Western Christian culture did. And so his argument, Alfred North Whitehead, is that you have to understand Christianity before you can understand science. And I would say the same thing to Steven Pinker. You have to examine the Christian worldview to even understand the Enlightenment project, because the Enlightenment project is similar to the scientific project in that you have to assume that there is an orderly universe and an orderly world that the mind can grasp. And that is what Christianity teaches, that God created the world in a wise way, and we're made in his image, and we can somewhat understand how these things came about because of the way we were built and the way the world is built. And so there's rationality, there's reason and wisdom in the building of the creation, and we're part of that, so we can grasp just a little bit of that. So let's get into the understanding of this book. I would say that this book is good in many respects. It's been a blessing. I would actually say that, because it goes through and really makes you appreciate how far we've come, the human race has come, and what a blessing it is to be living in the time we're living. And I'll go over some of the reasons why, but it's good in that sense because you get a greater appreciation and gratitude for where you're at and the time that you're living today. We just take these things for granted, but we can't, we shouldn't. We need to think in terms of praising God and thanking God for the common grace that he has allowed us to have in order to uncover and unpack a lot of these blessings that are in the world and were built on material realities that already existed in the world. And we just needed to find them out and discover them and follow through on them. So that's a blessing. And so it would be a great thing for Christians to read and really appreciate where we're at. We're coming up on Thanksgiving this month, And I believe this is one of the important holidays on the calendar because it gives us a time to be grateful for what we have instead of always worrying about what we don't have and how bad things are going and how we don't have it as good as, say, these people have it and so on and so forth. No, let's thank God for the blessings we do have. And this book actually outlines a lot of the blessings. Now, the explanation and the praise and glory of the book does not go to the triune God, and that's the great mistake. But we as Christians can look at the blessings and praise God and thank God for them. The book also does not take into account the fact that while there are so many different blessings and improvements and progress that has been made, there's also the situation where things have gotten worse spiritually and morally. And we see this kind of pattern in the Bible. God brings the chosen people, the Jews, into the Holy Land and gives them this inheritance. And they began to settle into the Holy Land, and then they turn away from God. So were they prospering in the Holy Land? Yes, but they were not progressing spiritually and morally. They were degressing, or they were declining. So just because we're progressing materially does not mean that we're progressing in all areas, and then other areas may be declining. And that's pretty obvious. I mean, Christians have been warning people about this secular humanistic culture for decades and decades. And I remember growing up, and I would read the books by Francis Schaeffer declining the moral and spiritual standards of the West and sounding the alarm that we need to pray for revival and pray that God turns our culture around because of the decline in morality and spirituality and devotion to God and obedience to God, and the rise of all kinds of new sins that the perverted minds of people like out in Hollywood have come up with. And these have spread all over the world, unfortunately. So the U.S. has been a blessing to the world materially and financially, but also it's been a curse to the world because of the filth that has flowed from places like Hollywood and all of the immorality and the criminality that is portrayed in movies, and even the music industry out in California, spreading the terrible attitudes of rebellion against all authority, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll scene. This, again, is an area that has declined. Music has declined in its moral and spiritual aspects. So we can just go on and on about that. But let me just read some of the blurbs on this book and give you an idea what it's about, and then I'll talk more about the criticisms that I have of this book. Enlightenment Now, the Case for Reason and Science, Humanism, and Progress. So he takes a very, very optimistic view of science and material progress. For him, as a atheistic, materialistic unbeliever, the only thing there is material progress. The only thing there is this kind of evolution on the earth of humans into more, you might say, advanced creatures. He doesn't have any understanding of eternity. He doesn't have any understanding of God or spiritual and moral progress. He doesn't have a hope of heaven. And so everything is just whatever can make our material earthly lives better. That's his standard. But as Christians, we know that there is a lot more to reality than just the material world we live in on this earth, that there's a whole eternity ahead of us with God, and God is the standard, not just our happiness. It says, Bill Gates here, founder of Microsoft, says, my new favorite book of all time. If you think, and Bill Gates is, again, if he's not an atheist outright, he's probably just an agnostic or a skeptic. He's not known for his understanding of anything about God and reality of the spiritual moral world. If you think the world is coming to an end, think again. People are living longer, healthier, freer, and happier lives. That's disputable. Happier lives? Again, that's the little optimism here, Enlightenment optimism coming through, and it's really irrational, I think. And while our problems are formidable, the solutions tie in the Enlightenment ideal of using reason and science. So this is the humanistic vision. Everything starts and ends with man. Man is the center of all things. This is the dangerous idea that the original Greek philosophers came up with. And it never would have produced the kind of blessings that we see today in the world if Christianity had not come along. Because the humanistic, man-centered vision ultimately leads to nihilistic hopelessness. Because if all it is just this planet Earth revolving aimlessly in space, and we're here just for a short time, and then everything is dark and death, then that has no meaning or purpose. But Christianity teaches that God has established a created order and that this world is not the only world. We will be in eternity forever. So what we build upon in this world will echo through eternity. And also the idea that people are happier in their lives. I don't think you can make that claim. That's actually one of the criticisms, is that while everything is progressing materially and spiritually, and we have better and more reliable automobiles and better transportation, and we're able to eat more food and healthier, and we have better medicine and medical treatments, even in the midst of all of this material progress, people are divorcing, the suicide rate continues to climb, the nihilism and pessimism and despair and discouragement of people is still rising. And you ask yourself, why in the world, in the midst of all of this prosperity, can people not be happy? Well, it's because their spiritual and moral nature is not being fulfilled. There is a hole in their soul, or they're dead souls, and they don't have any reason or purpose for life. And so they're just wandering around like zombies and just having all the good things. What did Jesus say? What does it profit a man, he said, to gain the world and lose his own soul? So in many ways, this Enlightenment Now book is touting the progress that humanity has made in the last few centuries, and has concluded that, we've gained the world. But at the same time, in many ways, we're losing our soul, because our society is turning into a ungodly, immoral, nihilistic, dark world. So this idea that people are happier, living happier lives, well, materially and spiritually, but not overall, because you wouldn't see the divorce rate, you wouldn't see the broken homes, the rebellious children, the alienated families, and the violence. You wouldn't see all of these signs that, no, people are not actually happier. That is a very disputed thing. Is the world really falling apart? And let me go up here again to this part of the blurb. If you think the world is coming to an end, think again. Well, the Bible actually teaches that in the end of the end times, in the book of Revelation, that all kinds of things will go wrong. Catastrophes. And in a real sense, the world will come to an end, in the sense that things will fall apart and collapse, and there will be wars and rumors of wars and all kinds of things. So Christianity and God's revelation to mankind teaches that the world will come to an end, and That's not a myth. That's a reality. And just because that's a bad idea, or just because you want to be positive, doesn't mean that you can play fast and loose with the truth. The truth is that through the nuclear holocaust that a lot of movies are depicting today, the world could actually come to an end materially too, not just morally and spiritually. Is the world really falling apart? Is the ideal of progress obsolete? In this elegant assessment of the human condition in the third millennium, cognitive scientist and public intellectual Steven Pinker urges us to step back from the gory headlines and prophecies of doom which play to our psychological biases. Instead, follow the data. In 75 jaw-dropping graphs, Pinker shows that life, health, prosperity, safety, peace, knowledge, happiness are on the rise. Again, that he's trying to get too much out of that claim. Not just in the West, but worldwide. This progress is not the result of some cosmic force. It is the gift of the Enlightenment, the conviction that reason and science can enhance human flourishing. So he's going to give all the glory and the credit for all our blessings to the human genius. And he's going to rob God of all his glory and blessings and good gifts to humanity. Even though we don't deserve to be blessed by a good God, we have been blessed. And so he's going to deny that and say that it was all because of us. We're the geniuses. We're the cause of our own blessings. And he's going to rob God of all the glory. Yeah, that's going to be a futility project, and I wouldn't want to be in his shoes on Judgment Day, because God is going to call him out and say, why did you rob me of the glory of my blessings to humanity, and try to put humanity itself as the blessing of itself? No. Humanity didn't pull itself up by its bootstraps. There was a God who was there to bless us as we inched our way forward. Far from being a naive hope, the Enlightenment we now know has worked. It has in some ways, and it hasn't in other ways. And we can see, for example, the 20th century was the century of the most slaughters and murders and deaths in all of human history. And that's the result also of the Enlightenment in the sense of man-centered philosophies, communism, Nazism, just terrible atrocities, the result of this self-centered, humanistic, man-centered philosophy without the wisdom of God. But more than ever, it needs a vigorous defense. The Enlightenment project swims against the currents of human nature: tribalism, authoritarianism, demonization, magical thinking. Well, he would call all Christian faith magical thinking. Again, that's his atheism, which demagogues are all too willing to exploit. Many commentators committed to the political, religious, or romantic ideologies fight a rearguard action against it. The result is a corrosive fatalism and a willingness to wreck the precious institutions of liberal democracy and the global cooperation. Liberal democracy, the precious institutions of liberal democracy. If you examine the precious institutions of liberal democracy, you will find that the Christian influence is just as heavy as any other influence. He's trying to say, oh, it's all Enlightenment. That's where all the great ideas came from. Well, what about Thomas Jefferson's famous line, we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights? Well, where do we get those rights? We get them from the Creator. Now you're bringing in Christian theology. Now you're bringing in morality and spirituality. You have to have that. See, we in the West, in the United States, we had written documents that were produced by a Judeo-Christian worldview. In France, during the French Revolution, they tried the humanistic way, and it led to almost a slaughter in their country. We didn't have that slaughter. We didn't have those mass murders. We had a revolution, that's true, but we didn't rebel against God and rebel against Christianity. We rebelled against a monarchical form of government. The French, on the other hand, in their French Revolution, they rebelled against God and Christianity, and they wanted to throw off all religion and create their own humanistic, self-centered, man-centered philosophy, and flowed right out of the thinking of the Enlightenment. So, yeah, he's trying to claim too much on that precious institution of the liberal democracy. Well, you have to give Christian theology credit for its input. With intellectual depth and literary flair, Enlightenment now makes the case for reason, science, and humanism, the ideals we need to confront our problems and continue our progress. Again, no mention of morality, no mention of Christian theology, which gives meaning and purpose to life. Now, the problem with his argument, again, like I said before, it paints a glowing picture of material progress. And you can't doubt that, because we have progressed so much materially and financially and physically. For example, the lifespan of the average adult today is so much higher than it was just even 100 years ago. And that's because of greater nutrition, better availability of food. And if you go way, way back, well, let's go back only maybe 200 years or so. The colonists here in the United States had to go out and basically hunt and shoot a deer and bring it home and process the food. And they had to grow crops in the fields. Every household basically had to grow its own food. And so there was a lot of work just to feed yourself. And it was a struggle sometimes because the crops failed and then you weren't able to find game to bring home, rabbits, deer. And so you go without meat, and it was a struggle. Today, we have food available in the grocery store, row upon row of food we can choose from at affordable prices. So material progress. Healthcare is another thing. We take it for granted, but if we have high blood pressure, we can take some pills to lower that, save our heart. If we have a problem with our body, we can have an operation. We just have so much more in terms of keeping ourselves alive physically. We have labor-saving devices that, every home basically has often will have a dishwasher, refrigerator, a stove for cooking. We'll have washer and dryer for clothes. And just so much vast improvements over just 150, 200 years ago. And other things have been gradually improved over and over. So, the horse and carriage, and then you had the automobile, and then you had mass production of automobiles by Henry Ford and others, and then gradual improvements on automobiles. And now safety is built into these cars. A lot of times people survive, whereas before they would have died in accidents. And you can go on and on and on. We have financial blessings here in the West. We live in a prosperous nation. We take for granted so much of these, and we shouldn't. Again, Thanksgiving coming up, we should be thanking God for all his blessings. And as Christians, we can and should take time to think through all the blessings God has given us. We are living in a great time, in a great place, and we should thank God for it. But at the same time, where Pinker fails in this book to take serious is that we are facing very many moral problems. And the rampant immorality, it's as if God had never spoken about conduct in human sexuality. We have sexual depravity with the so-called gay marriage now legal the corruption of our legal system that you would actually invent a thing called gay marriage and then invent rights as if it's an equal to godly, biblical, natural marriage, man and woman marriage. You would put it on the same level, gay rights and gay marriage. And now you have the transgender confusion, and what, 1/4 of the junior high girls are questioning their own sexuality and think they may be a boy, and it's just crazy, the confusion out there, the darkness, the spiritual darkness, the spiritual and moral darkness out there. So while we have vast improvements in material conditions on this earth, especially in the West, we have great declines in actual morality. Just in our country, 100 years ago, when the fail-safe default morality was Christian morality. And only the fringe people would think of shacking up and not getting married. But today that's common, to just shack up, live together in sin. You look at the parenting crisis, parents act like they don't know how to raise kids. And that wouldn't have been the case 100 years ago. Parents would have learned from their parents, who would have learned from their parents, basic Christian parenting principles, and there wasn't that confusion. And today there is. Kids are raised, a lot of them, in single-parent homes because married couples can't stay married. They just don't follow the biblical pattern of marriage, and they fail. So that's gone down. Especially, for example, in the African American community, in the late 50s, before the sexual revolution, African American families were fairly stable, with a man and a woman parenting children in stable families. Today, the African American community, the families are in shambles. The vast majority, 80% perhaps, in some areas, single parent mothers dominate the whole family scene. The fathers are gone, out of the home. The meaning and purpose crisis, a lot of people have given up hope. They don't have hope. They don't see a point or purpose for life. There's a lot of nihilism, depression, depression medication, psychological services, counseling services, therapy, psychiatry, psychiatrists. Why are all of these services needed if happiness is rising and people are growing? No, they're growing materially, but spiritually and morally, they're declining. Our population is here. And character loss, principle-less people don't act on principle and character anymore. They're just doing what they feel. And there's real chaos in the human person today. So, yeah, a lot of things have improved. We need to thank God for those, but we need to be realistic and pray that God brings about a spiritual and moral revival, because we need that, and we have to be honest and say we need it. It's not just narrow-minded pessimism that says that. It is reality. We need a spiritual and moral revival. Hope that's been helpful. We'll see you back next week. God bless.